Hi, this is Mr. Chandler. In the last unit, we looked at the Articles of Confederation and how weak they were, and then we looked at how the new government was created under the Constitution. Today, we're going to look at the principle of limited government. We've been talking about limited government since the beginning, if you think back to the colonial days and the Magna Carta, the rule of law, the English Bill of Rights. And so now we're talking about how our government has limited government. And this is a fundamental principle that's protected by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And so we're going to talk about some ideas in there: democracy, republicanism, federalism, separation of powers, the system of checks and balances, and individual rights. This is a really important unit to understand what our rights are today and why we want our government to be limited. Remember, the idea behind a limited government is we don't want a government that gets too strong that takes away our rights. So limited government. Government must be controlled so that it cannot infringe upon the rights of the people. There are constitutional limits that limit the power of the national government, that keep the national government from getting too strong. So what limits our federal government? Some of the ideas we look at, we've already studied, like the ideas behind the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights and the rule of law. The fundamental principle of democracy is that the government gets its power from the people. It derives, that means it gets its power from the consent of the governed. That means from the consent of those of us that we, the governed, consent to let them rule over us. In the Articles of Confederation, the sovereignty lied with the people. It was not a true democracy at its inception, since there were several classes of people that were unable to vote, if you think about it: slaves, women, non-landholders. But it does recognize the ultimate governing authority rested with the voters. And that's a big deal for the time, and it's more than any other country at that time. One of the big concepts is republicanism. That doesn't mean the Republican Party. This means the idea that voters are represented by elected legislatures. So this is that idea of representative government again. So we elect people who then make decisions in the interest of the voters. At this time, we directly elect members of the House of Representatives every 2 years. They're worried that the people aren't smart enough to make decisions, and so they're worried about this mob mentality, so they devise a way to indirectly elect the Senate, where they're appointed by the state legislatures. So the people in South Carolina would then elect state legislatures, those state legislatures would then pick the Senate. So the people kind of have a say, but not really. And they also indirectly elect the president through the Electoral College, which we still have. The national judiciary is not elected, but appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So we elect, in some cases, we elect people and they make decisions for us. In other cases, we elect people and then they pick other people to rule over us. And so we have a say in it, we do have a say in it in some ways. That kind of goes back to the idea of the Magna Carta, and we value that very highly. The structure of the government also limits the power of national government. In federalism, what federalism is that the national government has some power, and those are all very specifically listed in the Constitution, and the powers that are not listed in the Constitution are reserved for the states. And this is an argument for states' rights, and this is going to be one of the debates that's going to go on through American history all the way up through the Civil War, and even today in some ways. So basically what federalism is that the national government gets some powers and the state government gets some powers. And some of those overlap, like for instance taxes. Both the state and the national government can tax us. In other cases, the state deals with it. Like education, for instance. Education is controlled by the state, not the national government. So the power for education is not given to the national government, it's given to the states, while the power to maintain an army is given to the national government. And so this is the idea behind federalism, that there are powers delegated to the federal government, and you see all those listed over there. Then there are powers that are given to both federal and state governments, and then there are powers that are just reserved for the states. The power is also divided among the three branches of government: the executive, legislative, judicial. And then they also divide it further in the legislative branch into two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. So the legislative branch, what they do is they make the laws. So one thing that goes even further is the House of Representatives is given the exclusive right to start tax bills, to initiate new tax bills. And that's because they more directly represent the people. Remember, at that time, the Senate's not even chosen by the people, it's chosen by the state legislatures. But the House of Representatives is directly chosen by the people. So in this district of South Carolina, we're represented by Mick Mulvaney. Mick Mulvaney then goes to Congress and makes decisions based on what we want. He's elected every 2 years, so if he passes a tax bill we don't like, then he can be voted out of office pretty quickly the next time. The executive branch, they carry out the laws. That's the president and all the people that work for the president. And then judicial branch, which interprets the laws. And so they look at the laws to see if they are constitutional or not. And we'll talk about that when we get to the seventh standard. There are checks and balances put in place. One of the fears at that time is that the federal government is going to get too strong, and so they put checks and balances in place so that it doesn't get too strong. They're really worried specifically about the executive branch getting too strong and the president getting too much power. So basically what happens is the legislature passes the laws. The president has the ability to veto. The legislature can override those vetoes. The executive can make treaties, but only the Senate can ratify them, so they have powers over each other. And the judiciary and executive can be impeached by the legislative branch. The judicial branch can also say that laws that are passed by Congress and signed by the president are unconstitutional. So they have powers over each other so that one branch doesn't get too powerful, because that's a worry at the time. Another way that the power of the government was limited was through the Bill of Rights. These are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They limit the power of the national government. They say like certain things like freedom of speech and religion, assembly and press. They also protect against unfair trials and unreasonable searches and seizures. And it also has the right to bear arms in there. All right, well, that's it for limited government. I think the big idea to understand for limited government is that we always want our government to be limited in a way so that it doesn't get too much power, so they don't restrict our rights and take our rights away. But we also need the government to be strong enough to accomplish certain things. So in this unit, we looked at ways that the government was limited, which goes along with a lot of stuff that we've talked about from the beginning of the semester. We were talking about the Magna Carta, the English Bill of Rights, and the rule of law. These all go along very well with these things that we passed. So it goes along with those ideas of social contract theory and limited government. So thank you very much for watching. Please turn in the notes guide and also take the video quiz. Thank you very much. How long was that one?